Good evening. I'm Richard Kim. I'm Chair of Asian American Studies. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce Mr. Will Cobb. He has an extensive and impressive record of experiences and accomplishment. However, as you noticed, we were urged to keep our intros very brief. So I'm here to give you a much abbreviated bio tonight. Mr. Cobb attended the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. He also obtained his MBA at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His overseas assignments include Mexico, Nicaragua, and Colombia. His Washington assignments have included the Operations Center as a watch officer, and most recently as a special assistant to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. In July 2016, he started his latest assignment as the Republic of Korea Unit Chief in Washington. Will is married to Pam Cobb, who is also a Foreign Service officer, and together they have 2 children. So please welcome Mr. Will Cobb.
I gotta say, I was talking with Lynn just a second ago, and I was like, I don't even know if I want to use these. Especially, I gotta say, this is the first time I think I've ever done a presentation or a speech after a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. So I told my wife about that because when I first found out I was going to the Korea desk, the first book I read was, of course, Orphan Master's Son, which is pretty reputable around the State Department. If you're going to do Korea issues, you've got to read that book. So it's pretty amazing to be up here and I'll step right where you were and say it was a. But no, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for pulling this together. I'm sorry that my boss, Mark Lambert, had to go to Seoul. Surprisingly, given what's been happening in the world, there's a lot of reasons for us to be very engaged with our South Korean colleagues, and we are certainly just as engaged as we ever have been, if not more so, given what's going on in the world. Before I get started, let me just do, I've got a whole bunch of slides here, but I also want to kind of address the elephant in the room, no pun intended. We had a big election last week. We have a president until January 20th. We have a policy that we have been pursuing with South Korea. That is not changing, at least until January 20th. And all indications are that it's not going to change, after January 20th. There is a lot that is going to change. And we are kind of in a wait and see mode in a lot of parts of my building. But I can say, with confidence, as evidenced by what President-elect Trump said to President Park the day or 2 days after he was elected, that he understands this alliance. It's extremely important, and he doesn't anticipate things changing. That being said, it's very easy to say that, but we'll see how things play out. But we are very confident that given what's going on with North Korea and with our South Korean allies, that we're in a pretty good spot for some continuity based on everything that's happening. That being said, I have this presentation that I'm going to go through. But before I do that, I want to kind of paint the picture of how we at the State Department operate. And what we do in addressing issues on the Korean Peninsula is somewhat reflective of what we do with any country around the world. At the State Department, we've got the Korea desk. It's divided into 2 units, the DPRK unit and the ROK unit. On the ROK unit, which is my unit, I've got 5 action officers. And those officers have different portfolios which kind of reflect, one, the complexity of the relationship, but also how important it is to us. Because you could be on a number of other countries, or focused on a number of other countries, where you could have one officer covering 4 different countries. Or you could be on a big desk like the Korea desk, like we have with Russia or China, where you have a number of officers doing a number of different things. For the ROK team, I've got 5 officers. One focuses on the political military aspects of the relationship. Given the history between, North Korea, the Republic of Korea, our role in the Korean War and that alliance, formed in blood, more than 6 decades ago, as well as the ongoing threat from the DPRK, that job is extremely important, and we are doing stuff in that dimension all the time. I've got somebody that focuses on the internal aspects of the political situation, And given what's going on in South Korea, if you've been watching the news, that's an extremely busy portfolio right now. My officer that handles that portfolio was in Seoul for 2 weeks, got back last week. What an interesting time to be there, given what's going on, following the protests and everything else. I have another person that focuses on external political issues. A lot of times with Korea, they'll say, oh, well, it's the shrimp, between two whales. An analogy in the sense that you've got Japan on one side, you've got China on the other side, then you've got Russia nearby. They're in an extremely interesting position. Externally, there's a lot of things happening in terms of, the alliances, or the bilateral relationship between South Korea and Japan, the bilateral relationship between South Korea and China, the trilateral relationship between those three countries, the Philippines and the South China Sea and all these other types of things. We have a person that focuses on all of those aspects of of South Korea and their engagement and interactions around the world. I've got a person that focuses on economic issues. Free trade. Of course, you heard about that during our own political campaign when someone said, the course was the worst trade agreement in the world. And his course is backed up on that, and we haven't heard anything about it since he's been elected. And all indications are that trade is going to continue to be important, as evidenced by the conversation that President Pak and President-elect Trump just had last week. And then I have another person that focuses on something that's become so important to our relationship with South Korea. We call it New Frontiers: environment, science, technology, health, all of these types of issues. And sure, in one sense, maybe our new administration isn't going to focus on climate as much as President Obama has, but all of these other issues with technology and health, we expect to continue to be important, and possibly more important, given that relationship and the shared initiatives that we have around the world, quite frankly, working together to make the world a safer place. That's the ROK side. On the DPRK side, we have something similar. We have one person that focuses on sanctions. And that's hugely important because we have a coordinated pressure campaign going on like we've really, quite frankly, never seen, because we are in such lockstep, not only with our South Korean colleagues, but with our Japanese colleagues. Our sanctions person kind of handles that and is always providing information to our National Security Council and throughout the interagency to be working with Treasury and everybody else. It's got to be coordinated in order for us to have an effective sanctions policy. We've got another person that handles contingencies and kind of all of the provocation responses. This year we've had 25 attempted missile launches, 2 nuclear tests. That person's been very busy. And every time one of those activities happens, it triggers a whole response in Washington and the interagency. We have a person that manages that. And then we have another person that manages human rights. We have a special envoy that deals with human rights. Ambassador King, when I get to the slide, you'll see him. That is his passion. He's extremely effective, and he's got somebody from our desk that helps him with that. And then we've got another person that handles consular issues and everything else that comes up in the DPRK arena. We have Otto Warmbier, who's over there. We've had a number of other Americans that have been detained, a person that kind of focuses on those issues, as well as a number of other things that happen in the DPRK sphere. That's how we're set up for Korea. We have similar operations set up, like I mentioned China, I mentioned Russia, but pick any country in the world and we've got either a person or a team of people that are dedicated to strengthening the bilateral relationship, but also helping to make sure that we know everything we need to know when the White House calls or anybody else in the interagency calls, asking a question about what the U.S. government needs to be doing to address a particular issue. The US-ROK Bilateral Alliance. Of course, you know who this is on the right. That's President Pak. She's in a bit of dire straits right now. Yeah, I won't go into the details, but it's an extremely tenuous time for South Korea. It hasn't affected the relationship in any way, shape, or form. If you look at what's going on with South Korea, and Consul General Shin, I'm sure, will speak to this, the security aspect, their foreign affairs aspects, the Blue House is a very strong institution. we are still moving forward on a number of things, and we can expect to continue doing that. Given the DPRK threat, it's pretty clear to the majority of folks in South Korea that, hey, they may have their own internal issues, but they can't do anything to put at risk everything that's happening in the foreign affairs front, given what's going on with the DPRK. And I'll give some specifics about that in just a sec. The alliance between the United States and the Republic of Korea, I can with confidence say, in many ways, at least during the last generation, it has never been stronger. When you look at these numbers and you look back at the far left of the screen, you'll see that this 52%, 46% of folks had favorable opinions of the United States, where in 2014 it was all the way up to 82%. And you guys know our own history, what was going on back in 2002, 2003 with, 9/11 happened, and we got engaged in the Iraq War. All the while we were engaged in a lot of stuff happening in the Middle East. The DPRK had its own issues going on with, are we going to be developing our new nuclear program or not? They had their own, the Republic of Korea had its own internal political issues going on with their own president in terms of, what they wanted to do with the DPRK versus what we were doing. Quite frankly, it just wasn't as aligned as it is today. I mean, when I came into this position 6 months ago, I was amazed at just how in sync we were, how, we talk with our colleagues at the Republic of Korea Embassy in Washington every day, often multiple times a day, because we are so coordinated and harmonized in everything that we're doing. And we're doing the same thing with the Japanese with respect to the DPRK. And it's really something. I think there's a general sense within the Korean public of how significant and severe the threat is. You've heard publicly about quotes that have been said from leadership in the foreign affairs circles in South Korea about given the threats and where they are, it's like having a knife to our throat every day. The nuclear test in early September was like our own 9/11. Everybody in South Korea recognizes that the paradigm has shifted such that it is a ever-increasing threat, and they're looking to us to make sure that we are in lockstep and will provide the assurances that we have repeatedly guaranteed for now decades. But I think at this point, because it's so it's so apparent to everybody on the streets of Seoul that they keep launching these missiles, they keep doing these nuclear tests, the threat is real. You will hear periodically things about, do we need to develop our own nuclear capabilities? And President Park, her administration, and the majority of South Koreans still think, no, we can depend on the United States. And of course, based on what President-elect Trump has said, I think that is still there, but there are definitely uncertainties there, and they're going to be looking to the new administration to make sure that policy remains consistent. And given the stakes and what it would mean for us not to guarantee that assurance in our own nuclear umbrella, that would be, cause big ripples and big changes in the region. And I think that the new security team, the transition team, is coming up to speed on that very, very quickly. There's a reason we've been constant in assuring those guarantees for a long, long time. And based on the security situation, I think we're fairly confident it's going to stay the same. But this is a testament to, I think, how dependent we are on each other. And what is really, transition, I think, is from it being a country dependent on us for their security to becoming really partners, not only in the security dimension, but in the economic dimension, which I mentioned earlier, in addressing global issues, whether it's, Ebola and other things that the Republic of Korea has really stepped up to be a leader in. That's caused the relationship to really develop in a very, very positive way so that we really are depending on each other, working together in a number of fronts to make the world a better place. The bedrock of the alliance, security. I mean, Adam mentioned the Korean War. We had a lot of people die. They had even more people die. And kind of coming together and then looking at what happened with the Korean economy. 1960, they were $70 GDP per capita per person. Today, it's this year it'll be over $31,000. So you're talking of going from basically one of the poorest countries in the world to one of the most developed, most industrialized. I think you guys are familiar with that. This remains the bedrock. We work together all the time. We now have 28,500 troops. Of course, that number has changed over the years. It's still a lot of people. I envision it's going to continue to be a lot of people for a very long time. This THAAD battery that's going to be deployed, everything is underway. Yesterday there was the announced deal of the land where that THAAD battery is going to be placed is finally in control of the Republic of Korea government, having gotten it from the Lotte Group. So those things are all continuing to happen. There is quite a bit of discussion about something called Ysomia, which is in the press in South Korea quite a bit. That doesn't pertain to us in one sense, but in other ways it's extremely important. That is basically an intel sharing agreement going on between Japan and the Republic of Korea. We're not involved in it, but we're watching it, because that will allow Japan and Korea to, for the first time, be able to share information in real time. When you're looking at the North Korean threat, that becomes a pretty big deal in terms of what's happening from a military dimension. Politically in Korea, that's been a big deal for a long time. The deal was almost signed in 2012, but given the historic challenges in the relationship between Japan and Korea, it was scuttled in 2012, but everything, per what you see in the press, seems like it's going to actually happen in the next week as it gets finalized in the Blue House. So we're cautiously optimistic that will happen, and that will allow for more coordination, not only between us and South Korea, but amongst the three countries that really, really have to be integrated in terms of if something was to actually happen with a missile launch or something else. These two slides, I think I mentioned this briefly. The Republic of Korea's role in the world has really, they're a model, is how we describe them, all around the world. This doesn't even count right here. This top bullet talking about the $44 million a year that they spend on humanitarian aid. In September, they tacked on another $100 million that they will contribute on top of that $44 million a year for the next 3 years as part of their commitment and being part of the President Obama's refugee summit that happened on the margins of the UN General Assembly in September. You guys can read just as well as I can. This bottom bullet is pretty important. The global health security agenda. It's a White House priority in the wake of the Ebola scare and other global health scares, MERS. For example, South Korea has stepped up, and not only are they contributing to this global health security agenda, but there's a 10-country steering council, and they're the chair of that council next year. They have sponsored, I think it's 18 different developing countries where they're spending on infrastructure as well as providing expertise in the form of doctors and other folks that are equivalent to like our CDC that are going around to these countries, helping to bring up their infrastructure and tracking so that if another Ebola outbreak or some other type of disease starts to take root somewhere, we will have the warning system in place to be able to track it. So I can tell you that the Obama administration has been extremely grateful and appreciative to everything that the Republic of Korea has been doing the last couple of years in a number of fronts, and we expect that to continue. This is really another bedrock of, I think, the strength of our relationship. This number is going down a little bit. We're a little bit below 60,000 now, or at least as of the numbers that we got about 2 weeks ago. But again, we were just over 60,000. We're now just below 60,000. But the bottom line is there's a heck of a lot of folks that study in the United States, and that's a win-win for us in so many different ways. I've got a couple of different exchange programs that are listed there. I mentioned the importance of the relationship between the U.S., Japan, and the Republic of Korea. That top bullet there, 5th deputy level meeting. What is that? Well, we have a deputy secretary. Just about every agency in Washington has one. Ours is a guy, Deputy Secretary Tony Blinken, who came over from the NSC. In his brief time there, we've done 5 of these. Right now, they're happening about every 3 months. We have another one the first week in January. We had the last one in October. that happened in Tokyo. These other bullets are all things that we do or talk about at those deputy or D-level meetings. We are working together on so many different things, and I have a spreadsheet at home. It's got literally like 30 different things that we're working in that trilateral space, and we expect these things to continue. Sure, we've been meeting every quarter under the current administration. Maybe it'll slow down a little bit as people get put into place. But the value and the importance of this, I think, is largely responsible for why we have this JSOMI agreement happening as well, is that when you're talking about all of these other things in areas that are clearly win-wins for everybody, it makes it easier to talk about some of the things that quite often may be less comfortable because you're developing the relationships that you need in order to be able to do the things that are more difficult. So we've been doing a number of things with them in this space. This Cancer Moonshot, for example, was something that happened at the UN General Assembly. The Vice President, our Vice President, hosted it, and basically, we've got a number of things that are happening in the cancer realm with research and development in Japan as well as in South Korea. We're doing tons of things here, and this was kind of setting up the forum for which we're now sharing the research and development across the three countries so that people aren't reinventing the wheel in the different countries, but we're also trying to then bring in other folks so that that research is not just being shared amongst those three countries, but with folks in Germany and other places that are doing similar types of projects. North Korea, and I know I don't have that much time, and you probably have a million questions, and I guess we're going to save those to the end. Let me hit some key things here. I think that picture kind of says it all. That's a problem. The Republic of Korea, the United States, remain committed to a nuclear-free peninsula. I get it. It's pretty clear based on the 5 nuclear tests that there are nuclear capabilities north of the 38th parallel or the DMZ. Our goal, our pressure campaign, is to make sure that we take that backwards and that we get back to the nuclear-free peninsula. There are a number of things that we're doing in that realm. You'll hear about something called a pressure campaign, and I talked about us being harmonized with respect to sanctions, with respect to other countries that are doing things to make it more difficult or to put more pressure on the Kim Jong-un regime. Here's the thing. No one really knows exactly, because of the how opaque it is, and because we don't have people in North Korea, no one really knows how effective we're being. But I'll throw out this analogy. If you were to talk to folks that were part of the Russia desk at the State Department, or look at that team from 1984 to 1987, I'm going to guess that you would have said, what are they doing? This is not working. These guys are a bunch of idiots. But then if you were to look at the same team from 1987 to 1990, you would have been like, those folks were genius. Good, look at what they've done. We have no idea exactly how effective our pressure campaign is being, other than the engagement that we have with the Chinese, with the Russians, and other folks that are engaged with, folks from the DPRK missions around the world. But we know that we're having an impact. There are so many challenging sanctions in place. Are they foolproof? No. Are there issues? Yes. Are we working with the Chinese and the Russians, along with, obviously, our Korean and Japanese colleagues and other folks in the international community to try and close those loopholes? Absolutely. We don't really know how effective that pressure campaign is, but if we didn't think it wasn't working, we certainly wouldn't continue doing it. We think we're having an impact. It's going to be difficult to know how successful we're being until we see the change that we seek. But given what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do, there are a lot of smart people across the U.S. government, throughout the Korean government, that are more confident than ever that we are getting, into a position that we're more comfortable with because we think we're having the impact that we seek. Obviously, we're about to go through a transition. We could very easily be going through a transition with the ROK government as well. But throughout everybody that's working, in this domain, this circle, we have the utmost confidence that we're doing the right thing, because the goal remains the same, is to get that back to that nuclear-free peninsula. There are obviously discussions all the time about the best way to do that. We are very confident that the campaign that we have right now, based on what we're seeing in the international domain, with so many people working with us, and because we are so coordinated now in a way that we really have never been, that we don't want to let up the pressure, and we're going to keep that pressure on. And it's actually pretty amazing to have the privilege and the opportunity to be working on this in the State Department, to see how we're working not only within our own interagency, but with our colleagues and allies to make this work. The stakes are extremely high, and there's no doubt this is going to be a huge challenge for the next administration. But we are continuing to move forward, and obviously we will be doing briefings with all the folks that are coming in as the political appointees switch out. But as we've changed administrations before, we see no reason to think that there's going to be a major change based on what we're seeing that indicates we are finding some success. Human rights, Adam talked about that, and obviously we're going to really hear about that from some of the other speakers tonight. This is something that we pay a lot of attention to. Again, if you start to say, well, are we being effective? Of course not. I mean, there's a lot of very bad, awful things that are happening in North Korea. Part of our reason for putting the pressure campaign is to be able to address some of these issues. Sam Power, our ambassador to the UN for the last several years, is extremely passionate about this, and this is something that gets discussed, quite regularly. Ambassador King he was just in Seoul a couple days ago. He's on his way back. Is always pushing these things. Sanctions. I think our sanctions campaign, we had another nuclear test in September. I'm sure you've been following things. Discussions are ongoing with the Chinese and the Russians. And I like to think that we will have a new Security Council resolution that tries to close some of the loopholes that were part of 2270, which was the security resolution that went into place last March. Again, a lot of quotes here on human rights and what a priority that is for us. Nuclear missile programs, I made reference to that. Obviously, this is a huge threat. You can look in the news to the quantitatively how many tests have they had, what they've done in 2016 compared to other years. I mean, you can't even compare the other years because there have been so many tests this year. Obviously, all cause for concern, but also part of that is why the international community is so united in trying to confront this. It's a huge threat, and it's not just Japan, Republic of Korea, and the U.S. that recognize this. China, Russia, and so many other international partners are working with us on this. A bunch more quotes on it, but obviously this is a huge threat that faces the new administration, and I think we've got things in place to keep this from getting worse, but only time will tell. Six-party talks. That's something that has got a lot of attention for a lot of years. It's kind of in a hold pattern. I think until we get strong indicators and proof that the North Koreans are serious about denuclearization, if they're not willing to talk about it, these talks are not going to start again. Because we've got a lot of students in the room, I got to say, being a diplomat working at the State Department, it's got to be the absolute best job in the world. I did a lot of things before I ended up joining state in 2007. Was in the military for a while, then went to business school, did volunteer work in Africa, then did business consulting. 9/11, along with basically just the desire and missing that piece of service is what drew me back into the government. And I really got exposed to the State Department through my Coast Guard contacts who had stayed in and started doing like attaché and liaison jobs in other parts of the world. That's what kind of piqued my interest. I throw these things out here: consular management, economic, public diplomacy, political. Those are the 5 cones you can basically track. I'm a consular officer. I haven't done consular work since 2010, so these are very loose-fitting cones or designations that we apply to all the officers that come in as generalists. And if you're, like me, I truly am a generalist in that I I'm doing mostly political work now, along with economic work, and I've done consular management, econ, and political overseas. And every job, there's not a diplomat that's not a public diplomacy officer. So we have people that focus on that, but I haven't been in an overseas assignment where I haven't been doing a lot of public diplomacy just as part of my job. So I have to throw that out there. Everybody here, future diplomats, right? And I think that is it. I'm not allowed to take questions.
Not yet, at the end.
All right. Thank you very much.